Welcome back to What the O Canada, and if you're new here, I am going to be meeting with you every Friday to bring to you some of the headlines that really jumped out to me that's happening in Canada that is not going to be shared globally that I feel is very important. I'm going to be your independent journalist, Nyx right here, and on Mondays you can catch me to see my vlog of how my life has changed since I moved to Serbia. Let's get into this. First and foremost, globally, we have just celebrated International Women's Day on March 8th. Also this month, it is Women's History Month. And while speaking on that, Toronto Raptors basketball team made a video to support women for International Women's Day as well as the Women's History Month.
Girls run the world because they're the only one that can procreate. They birth everybody. All women are great because they're all queens.
They were required to apologize about the video and put out a secondary video of the apology in case they offended anyone, and said that they will not do that going forward. Not sure what the problem was or why they had to apologize. In other sad news today, 64 Mexicans were found in very poor living conditions that were being exploited for labor. They were previously brought over to Canada to perform working duties, and when they arrived in Canada, they received less than expected. They were not considered registered immigrants, and they were now living in deplorable standards.
Around the GTA, at farms, factories, and warehouses. Police say what the 64 Mexican workers in the human trafficking ring endured is disturbing.
Forms of coercion and control, which included isolation, a lack of freedom, being financially bound, threats, and sexual assault.
In their living quarters, officers describe overcrowding, dozens of people sleeping on mattresses on the floor, dealing with a lack of food, privacy, and bug infestations. Then in November, one victim came forward. After a 3-month investigation in conjunction with the Canadian Border Services Agency, police broke up the ring, rescuing 64 men and women.
We have a teen who is fighting for his life, while 6 other teens and 1 adult have been charged with attempted murder. The incident happened outside of a school in the Brampton area where a teen was attacked and stabbed. Again, that teen is in hospital, and unfortunately, as spoken previously, it has become very difficult to go to school in the GTA, which is considered the greater Toronto area, and actually feel safe or feel confident as a parent that your child will come home to you safely.
It was a violent fight, police say, outside of Brampton High School that has left a 17-year-old boy with serious injuries after being stabbed. And now 6 boys and 1 adult are facing charges.
When this altercation occurred in the parking lot, that there were weapons, multiple weapons, and it's my understanding that they're all students from there.
It happened just after 11 Monday morning at Sandalwood Heights Secondary School. Since then, police have charged 7 people with attempted murder, including 18-year-old Modosar Mosmer, plus 6 boys, 5 17-year-olds and 1 16-year-old. One of the boys has also been charged with pointing a firearm and uttering death threats.
This is extremely saddening to think that these youths are now facing such severe charges of attempt murder, when these circumstances could have been avoided just by using your words.
Investigators also recovered 2 replica firearms after searching 3 homes and 2 vehicles in Brampton. Some students are still reeling.
It's rough. I gotta come to school every day knowing that, something could happen.
Scary, knowing that a stabbing happened here at school.
It's a little unsafe, I guess. More precautions in the school, maybe.
Parents picking up their kids today are also concerned.
That it never should happen again. We're thinking teachers are, teaching them, they're learning, and then this end up happening. It's nerve-wracking.
I really feel insecure for my kids.
The Peel District School Board says throughout the week, support staff and a social worker have been on site to provide mental health and well-being support for students and staff. This support will be in place at the school for as long as it's needed. The 6 boys charged cannot be identified under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. Police say the victim is expected to recover from his injuries.
In other news, recently there was an attack on a home in the GTA in a town called Milton, where intruders that were armed with guns came into the individual's home to rob the home. While the homeowner was present, also there with her son, who deployed a shot to the intruders, and one of the intruders actually passed from the single shot. Now, instead of him being commended for his self-defense and protecting his household and his mother, instead he was arrested and charged with murder. And he is now going to face second-degree murder charges rather than even manslaughter charges, which would still be something that should have never been considered.
Mr. Mann, how are you feeling? Ali Mian walks out of the Brampton courthouse just 11 days after police allege he shot and killed a home invasion suspect who entered his Milton home. His lawyer says Mian, who Halton police have charged with second-degree murder, should never have been charged.
Family's, of course, very, very happy. Client's very happy, especially that I was able to get him bail so quickly, as usually on a murder bail, it's quite a lengthy process.
Mian, who walked into the prisoner's box with a limp, was released by Superior Court Justice Bruce Durno on $130,000 bail. The judge saying this is an appropriate case for release. I take into account the position proposed by the Crown. The evidence heard in court is under a publication ban. This was an uncontested bail hearing, meaning the Crown prosecutor consented to Mian's release. How were you able to get him out so quickly?
Just by working really, really hard and putting together a very good bail plan and convincing the Crown.
It was February 19th around 5 a.m. when Halton police say 5 suspects with the intent of committing a robbery entered the Milton home where Mian lived. One of the suspects was fatally shot. Another suspect was arrested with break-and-enter and unauthorized possession of a firearm, while 3 others fled in this light-colored sedan. Mian was also arrested and charged with murder. His lawyer says the intruders were armed, and Mian, a registered firearm owner, was defending his mother, who also lived in the home. This former Crown prosecutor, now defense lawyer, is not involved with the case.
What all of this tells me in my experience is that the Crown has sized up pretty early that this case is not a great one.
The conditions of the release include Mian live with his grandmother and be supervised by her or another family friend, not possess any weapons nor ammunition, surrender his firearms license and passport to police. He's also not permitted to leave the province.
I don't believe electronic monitoring is even part of the equation, which is almost a given for a murder bail.
As I've spoken on the hospital incidents in Canada, as well as I've spoken on the hospitals in Serbia, it is very important to share that there was a mass protest that just took place in Toronto, where nurses are standing up for patient care, saying that they do not have the financial means nor the right contract or support for the patients that are coming in the hospital. This is affecting not only the patients, but also the nurses in the Toronto area. As mentioned previously, Justin Trudeau went on to make a video stating that the heroin and cocaine funded by taxpayers' dollars is actually the only way to proceed. Please take a look at that video.
And safe consumption. The project that we have, working with BC to decriminalize possession of harder drugs now. There was a lot of shouting about that, and it's a very politically polarizing issue still. And you can see the Conservative leader doing videos about how bad that is, but grounding ourselves in facts and data and public treatment and evidence of a public health problem is the way to move forward on this. So we're going to continue to invest in support.
Furthermore, regarding schools, we just had a school under investigation after a 6-year-old black boy was locked in a closet-sized room and he was separated from his peers. The incident is still under investigation and they're trying to determine if this was a racial discrimination or how this actually happened.
Midtown Toronto, it's now launched an investigation. According to the advocacy group Parents of Black Children, a 6-year-old was subjected to anti-black racism at school, allegedly daily, so his mother sent him to school with a recording device attached to see what was going on. Now, among the allegations made public by the advocacy group, the child was allegedly detained in an isolation room at one point. His desk was allegedly isolated in a corner and he had to sit there all day. And the teacher allegedly told the boy's mother that he was obnoxious and unpleasant to be around. The group Parents of Black Children says this isn't an isolated incident. It's calling on the Ontario Human Rights Commission to launch an inquiry into anti-black racism within the education system in Ontario. Meanwhile, the TDSB says the school's principal, vice principal, and teacher have now all been put on home assignment while the board investigates. And in a statement, the TDSB said in part, quote, "No child should experience what has been reported. and we apologize for the impact it has had on the student and their family. We are currently investigating and are committed to taking the required steps on each action reported to us. Meanwhile, there is a news conference scheduled for 1:30 this afternoon.
More than 1,000 principals, also known in Serbia as directors, have come forward to say that the students in the Ontario province do not have self-regulation. They're showing signs of mental health struggles as well as behavioral issues, and that the unaddressed mental health is going unnoticed with a lack of support not only for the staff but also for the students. Recently, we had an individual in Canada who was a biological female who had transitioned to a male. Now, that individual has done a reverse transition where she has now gone back to her biological gender. Now, she is fighting for the rights of individuals who are seeking transitions and saying that there should be more education and support prior to the transition. She is fighting that she was not educated enough to make the right decision and that the detransition has been actually very difficult.
Transition woman, and I am pursuing legal action against the health professionals that facilitated my medical transition. I began identifying as transgender in young adulthood with no dysphoria beforehand. This was not a red flag to me, as I was assured that many people discover their true gender identity later in life. Less than a year after coming out to myself, I was prescribed synthetic testosterone, which permanently virilized my voice and appearance. I had a bilateral mastectomy 14 months later, and finally, 8 years into my transition, I had a medically unnecessary hysterectomy covered by the Ontario Health Insurance Plan. Each step involved irreversible alterations to my body and came with serious risks, yet all were met with little challenge despite my long-standing history of mental health struggles and no indication of gender-related distress in childhood or adolescence. I am alleging that this lack of inquiry is a failure of due diligence amounting to medical negligence towards a vulnerable patient. I will have to live with the effects of this so-called treatment for the rest of my life. I have spent the last 18 months involved in healthcare advocacy related to this topic. I have spoken at universities, presented at webinars, been featured in news articles, appeared on podcasts, and written blogs semi-regularly, sharing my experiences and my thoughts on how something like this could have happened. My advocacy is largely not for me. What happened to me cannot be undone, but rather it is in hopes of preventing it from happening to someone else. It took me 10 years to figure out why I could have falsely believed something like this, and why so many professionals could have wrongly encouraged it. I can imagine that there are a lot of people who will eventually find themselves in my position, some of them vulnerable adults like I was, and some of them too young to understand the long-term consequences. Through this action, I am not only seeking justice for myself, but also hoping to raise awareness about the recklessness of gender-affirming healthcare. Concerns about it have been raised internationally, with several countries altering their approach in response to systematic reviews of the evidence. However, here in Canada, discussions about it have barely gotten off the ground. I'm hoping to start that conversation.
On the topic of a trans woman who had raped a 13-year-old girl, however, identifies as a woman, so has now been placed into the women's prison rather than in the biological gender's prison, which would have been a male's prison. Books in libraries are now being changed to represent non-binary and asexual individuals in the books. Some of these books are written by authors who have since deceased, who have no opportunity to oppose the change. However, their books are being changed instead of him, her, she, he, to now all they and them. Also on the topic of books, a father is upset after finding a book called Gay BCs that appears to look like it's for children under the age of 3 years old. However, the word B stands for bi rather than book. Now, some of you may say that's okay, but I mean, we should not be talking about sexual preferences to 3-year-olds. Thank you for tuning in to What the O Canada, where I continue to bring you information and updates coming out of Canadian news. Some of it which is not shared in the very public eye, and some of it that is just shared amongst the Canadians that know how to find it. simply sharing this information just so that everybody understands my decision of why I've moved, and that there's no exaggeration that not only is education and the health opportunities better here, but also the quality of life. I look forward to meeting with you guys next week, and I will meet with you on Monday if you would like to follow my journey all about my vlogging experience, which is a lot more fruitful of personality and not just bringing you glum chum news. Again, thanks for tuning in. I look forward to meeting with you again. Talk to you soon. Bye to all my Serbians. Zdravo.